In this video, we're talking about Rapier. We're talking about Bleed Rapier. We're talking about Evade Rapier. We're talking about Worm. We're talking about Gorgon. We're talking about every kind of application where you're using single target high damage Rapier where they request, I need a Bleed or I need an Evade Rapier. Anyway, we're going to break that down. I'm going to tell you about the attributes, the skills, kind of what's expected for different types of Gorg runs or Worm runs, all of that coming up in this video. Before we get into that, I just want to say thank you so much for your support. We've literally almost hit 2,000 subscribers on this channel, and while I haven't been uploading as much as I want to, it's crazy how much support you guys are still giving. Thank you so much, and let's get back to this video. So to get started, we're going to be talking about gear, we're going to be talking about different options, and we're also going to be talking about where you can get not only the farmable versions of that, but also what you can get in the end game and what you should probably prepare for when it comes to these builds. So to start, I'm going to show you what my current build is and why I have it set up this way. This is not saying that, oh, you should go get this, because there's not only some Gorgon stuff, but also some Worm drops in here. But what you should be looking for is, as a base, understanding why we're choosing these things. Number one, everything is centered around the finisher artifact. Now, there are options that are not the finisher, but with an artifact that is, in my opinion, one of the easier artifacts to get in the game, all you have to do is actually go and farm this down in Isle of Zervan. If you don't know how to do that, I'll go ahead and show you. So once you get here down here in Isle of Zervan, you're going to see three elemental mammoths here. You have the lightning here, and if you continue down the path, maybe somebody hasn't killed them so I can show you. There are two more elementals, but they should be somewhere right here. Somebody might have already taken them down. This is a very popular farm because finisher is one of those artifacts that you kind of need. Like there's the one that's nature, and maybe I can't see the lightning one. Anyway, what you do is you kill all three of those. It spawns the Montramal. I can't remember what his name is. Anyway, once all three of those are dead, it'll spawn the big guy, and he'll spawn right here in this little alcove. And if you're looking on the map, I'll go ahead and zoom in, looking where Isle of Zervan is. This is where you're going to take the Shrine of the Lion. We're going to go across all of this, and then spawning right here on the ground, this is where he'll be after you kill the three elemental mammoths. That being said, here's the finisher and why we're choosing it. Looking at it specifically, it's a 725. It's an artifact. We can upgrade it. Go get your coconut from the actual FFA area so that you can use it to upgrade this. But what you're putting on it is Disdained Infliction. Potency of outgoing dots are increased by 15%. And then if you have it in PvE, you're going to be able to do plus 5% damage. The big thing about this is it's increasing your bleed damage, which means that when a bleed is popped, we'll talk about that in a moment, it's going to do even more damage. Looking at the perk specifically on it, it comes with Deadly Flourish. Flourish deals plus 42% more base damage. Flourish and Finish is what you're using to actually pop the bleeds, be able to do extra damage. I'll show you that in a moment. Keen Tondo, 26% chance against a target's affected by Tondo's bleed. If this perk is on a weapon, Tondo also inflicts 10% weaken. Really nice right here. Depending on if you're a bleed or an evade build, the finisher's nice. But what really makes sense and why people use it is attacks against bleeding targets deal 15% more damage. That's what's important, seeing as you're obviously going to be applying bleeds, 15% more, and the fact that this works on both weapons. And if you have any of the Gorgon weapons that have Keenly Jagged, this synergizes so well with those as well. So again, make sure you upgrade it with Disdained Infliction, and you can purchase this on the market. I think it's called Poisonous Nectar. You can buy these on the market for not the most expensive, but they're not always the cheapest. But anyway, upgrade it. Now, everything else about this build, depending on what you're doing, is kind of set in stone or flexible, and I'll talk about those when we get there, and I'll give you options for what you can use in its place. Number one, when it comes to the offhand weapon, it totally depends on what you're doing. If you're a person wanting to be able to do some range and have some extra damage, a musket is going to be really nice because we are going to be speccing both in dex as well as in intelligence, so you're able to get a lot of extra damage from having a musket on and being able to use that. There's some really cool gameplay that you can use with this specifically, especially if you have up close and you're using traps. Really nice gunplay and gameplay with the hoplite and musket. But there are other things. You can go ahead and use something like a bow and be able to get some more haste, do some more fun things with that. You'll also be able to use something like a greatsword, which sounds crazy, but when you're doing melee stand break for Worm, they're going to want you to have an intelligence greatsword, which is pretty easy to get. All you got to do is just spec everything in intelligence, magnify and all of that, put a greatsword on, have no other offhand, and then just open one of the two-handed chests from the well, and you'll be able to get an intelligence greatsword pretty easy there. As far as other offhands, you could totally rock a spear if you're going to be able to running spear in the offhand. You can run a hammer so you can apply more weakens, whatever the case, or rends. There's a lot of options when it comes to this, but typically you're going to see a musket, or you're going to see a bow, or you're going to see a greatsword if you're doing melee stand break, anything like that. So the offhand doesn't matter as much. What matters is at the finisher. All right, let's talk gear. Now I'm going to go through my pieces, but I'm going to mention what you really want. If you're running Worm or anything like that, even in like regular open world stuff, you're going to want things like Enchanted Ward and Refreshing. You're going to want to make sure your Refreshing is at 4 stacks. In Enchanted Ward, you're going to want to have 4 Enchanted Wards. This is one of those things that if you're running with groups that are doing Worm, not only in like specific discords, but set builds will always ask for 4 Enchanted Wards, because you're going to be dealing with a lot of light and heavy attacks from the ads that are in the room. So this is a really nice thing to have. So what would I encourage you to do? Yes, grab some Enchanted Ward gear and Refreshing. And the way you can get that is the Azoth crystal gear. And the benefit of this gear is you can actually craft it at the kiln. And so if you're able to run some mutators, you don't even have to run anything when it comes to Gorgon. You can actually go over here and type in Azoth crystal. And yes, they're going to be, 3,500 materia per, but you can see it comes with Enchanted Ward, Refreshing. You can get all light, medium, or heavy to have all of those perks drop. And the other benefit is you're able to slot that third perk and change it to whatever you want. So a good way to start, if you're not running Gorgon or anything like that and trying to build your set, Azoth Crystal, you can buy it from the kiln, or slot the right gear. So if you want light armor, go into an M2 and start doing some M2s, and you'll get some Azoth Crystal stuff to drop. Getting back to the gear, what I'm currently running is, I have an Azoth Crystal mask, which is not fully upgraded. It just has health on it. I'm currently running the Silken Cocoon, which is the Keen shirt. This is one of the actual named drops that you get from doing Worm. The only reason I'm running this is because I have it. Otherwise, I would be running something like an Azoth Crystal shirt with Enchanted Ward, Keen, as well as Shirking Energy. This is just what comes on this specifically. I like the Keen because of the extra crit chance. You want to hit criticals, more damage, basically. For my hands, I'm using Enchanted Ward Refreshing. This is actually the Hoplite hand covers. This is the same thing as the Azoth Crystal, except it's 725, and I could roll the perk on there. Now, this is one of those first perks that is a required perk as an evade player or even a bleed player, is Leeching Flurry. This is a required piece, and you want it on a piece of gear because, yes, it's more healing on the weapon, but you want Disdained Infliction, right? Leeching Flurry is so nice because as you're doing damage and you're in the mix, you're going to be running lower con. You're not only going to get all of your health back, but you also have iframes. You have invulnerability in the middle of this, which is really nice to help save you in a pinch. For the artifact on the armor, I use attuned leather pants. There is a full argument, and yes, those of you in the comments are going to say, yeah, you totally should be using nimble coat so that your evade cooldown is as low as possible and your flurry cooldown is as low as possible. And while I totally agree with you, I want to use the Keen shirt. So I'll show you what it looks like with a nimble coat build here in just a moment. But I use attuned leather pants, which allows me to get almost 350 dex and 300 intelligence, which is a lot of damage. On the attuned leather pants, you can kind of add whatever you want. You can even put one of the weapon perks here if you would like. So that you don't have to spend as much to re-roll one of the other pieces, because it takes like 3 seals compared to 1. So you could put Leeching Flurry or something on this to be able to help yourself out. For my boots, this is where the last required perk is, which is Omnidirectional Evade. 11% damage for 2 seconds after using Evade, and the Adagio upgrade is applied in every direction. We'll talk about that in a moment, but this is not something special. These are just medium boots that I made. It's the only medium piece in my set minus the actual attuned leather pants, and I crafted them as a 2-perker to get Enchanted Ward omnidirectional, but once again, you could totally do Azoth Crystal Shoes, I think it's called, and then just put omnidirectional Evade on them. These 2 perks are required. Omni Evade and Leeching Flurry are required for these builds to be effective and do the most damage. You totally need these. For the amulet, things change. This could be changed out to whatever you would like. For Worm specifically, you're going to want Strike Protection as well as Empowered. I wish I had Strike Protection, Empowered, and Health, but I bought this one off the market for pretty cheap. But what you really want to aim for is probably an Empowered so that your Adagio and all of those other upgrades can last a little bit longer. This would be nice to have here, so even if it's Health, Divine, and Empowered or something like that you can roll, that would be a really nice amulet to have, but specifically make sure you have stuff that's going to work for your mutations. Now, if you're doing things like in Gorgon and you want to actually rotate your amulets out, it wouldn't be a bad idea to invest in some amulets that have Empowered on them and the protection you're looking for, right? So those are some things that you should look at depending on your amulet. And this one isn't like, this is BIS. But what you should be looking at is finding an Empowered and combining it with some other stuff. For the ring, I'm running Elemental Band. And the only reason I'm doing that is, am I doing elemental damage? No. But I'm doing it because it's a 725 ring that gives you Keen Awareness, Hardy, and Leeching. And the big benefit here is not only is it crit chance, but you're also getting a little bit more heals off this Leeching. And instead of having to go get the Elemental Band and upgrade it by doing Worm, which is one of the requirements, you can easily make this same ring by going over to the kiln. And if you look at Azoth Crystal ring, I think it's at the bottom here, the Azoth Crystal ring comes with Hardy and Leeching, and you can put Keen Awareness on it. So you can have a 700 ring with Hardy, Leeching, and Keen Awareness that is Magnify that will work just fine, or you can craft it, whatever the case. So there is another option for this piece of jewelry here. And for the earring, this is once again, this is not a perfect roll, but I needed refreshing to get my 4/4 stack and empowering toast so that I can eat some kind of pot somewhere to give me even more damage when I needed it to get that empower to stay at empower cap. And I like Healing Heart. So when you pop your rune glass, you're able to get a little bit of extra health. I do like Healing Heart. So is this a perfect ring for my build currently and the way it currently sits? Yes, it is, but it's not necessarily the perfect ring all the time. I would not be using Endless Thirst. Maybe if I was using Azoth Crystal Ring, I might use Endless Thirst, but I want to be able to use my pots as much as possible rather than them just being more potent. Now, one of the things you might be asking is, why am I running Carnelians? And it should be pretty obvious. I'm trying to not generate threat. And this is really popular in like Worm or even Gorgon sometimes, to be able to run Carnelian so that you don't get the threat and help your tank out as much as you can, but especially in Worm because they're range tanking most of the time. But we're running Punishing Carnelians, which is 8% less threat per Carnelian, and you're dealing 1.5% more damage to taunted foes, and your melee attacks are doing 1.1% more. So we have that on all of the pieces of the armor, and we're running Carnelians in our specific jewelry over here. So there's 30% here, 40% over here. So we're at 70% threat reduction just from being able to do this, to be able to make sure that we don't grab aggro while we're swinging. Now, when it comes to a nimble coat build, you want to make sure you put Enchanted Ward on it, and then all of the gear that you have needs to be light. It's the only way that you can stay in a light equip load and be able to make it work. And now, could I slot this directly in and do my build? Yes, but I don't have an Omni Evade light boot, which would basically make it to where I could do a nimble coat light build. And it does make a difference. Those cooldowns, they are much lower, and you're able to in some ways get a little bit more damage by doing it this way. That being said, I'm able to get more attributes, which is what we're going to talk about now. Oh, before we get to attributes, Before we get to attributes, let's cover this right here. We're going to be talking about the Heartrunes. There are, I think, 3 Heartrunes that you should really focus on if you're going to be an Evade Rapier and you're wanting to do all types of in-game content. One of them being this one, the Stalwart Heartrune of Firestorm. This is what's called the Fire Kick, or the kick that you would be using inside of Worm. This is so you have Cleansing Storm. It gets rid of the acid kind of buildup that would occur. And this is when they're like saying, want someone kick, whatever the case. This is what they're talking about, is the Stalwart Heartrune of Firestorm. Also have Brutal Heartrune of Detonate, so you can have a bigger explosion, which is really nice. So if you need Deado, this is one of those things that you need to have. This is also something you would be using for War as well. And then for Gorgon or other activities, Brutal Heartrune of Grasping Vines, so that you can get Rends as well as Weakens. Upgrading to the 625 variants of each of these 3 is what's really important. Making sure that you go to these is what is important. Like base Firestorm does not do the cleansing part. You have to upgrade it to Stalwart, right? The Deado, to get the extra explosion, to be able to do more damage, you have to upgrade it to 625. And the same thing to get the Rends and the Weakens and all of that, you have to upgrade it to 625 for Grasping Vines. Now, when it comes to attributes specifically on this build, we'll talk about it differently. But we're going to talk about it from a perspective of doing an Evade Rapier first, and then we'll go and do talking about Bleed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to make my dexterity as close to 350 as I can. Unfortunately, I have it set to where I'm basically going to be 356. I would love to have those 6 points, and you'll see why in just a moment. But for right now, we're at 356 dexterity. We're going to take the 25 strength so we can get more light attack damage, which is all we're doing with the Rapier. We're almost never heavy attacking. Actually, I don't think I ever heavy attack with the Rapier. The next thing is we're going to go into intelligence as much as we want compared to our con. For in-game content like Worm or even Gorg, you probably want to run as low as Constitution as possible so you can get even more damage. But even in Gorg, I'll probably run usually around 100 con, depending on the team. But in Worm, no, I just leave it at what it is, and I'll go in as much intelligence as possible. Now, without food, because I haven't popped a food yet, I'm at 259 and 356 for dexterity as well as this. You can also go ahead and drop, like for example, if I dropped the 9 points, I could go ahead and go into 25 focus, which is what I want to do, but I do want the 300 bubble right here. So I want to move these 6 points to focus because I want to be able to get 300 after I pop a food. That's just my current situation. I'll fix that later. But for what you need to know as an Evade Rapier, you need to go 350 dex, get the con of what you want, 25 strength, 25 focus, and then the rest and intelligence. That's what you need to focus on. So when I pop this right here, I'm going to go ahead and go eat an intelligence food, which is a 44 food. And right now I'm at 294. You can see why I want those 6 points, right? And 356. I would be 350, 300 right here if I could just move those down. I'll eventually rework my gear, but for right now, this is where I'm currently sitting, and I have just under 9,000 health. And some of you might be like, wow, that's really low, and technically it is, but if you look at the base damage for the Rapier, 1822 base damage. So you can see how quickly that will scale. And I'll show you a really quick clip right here of me on Worm doing an evade right here. And you can see how much damage I'm popping and how quickly I'm popping it. And that's just a testament not only to all the Rends and the damage that happens in game, but having such high stats and a high base damage on the Rapier. Now you can see why people ask for Rapiers. It is an unreal amount of damage. Now, for Bleed Rapier, you want to actually flip these two. So what you're going to do is instead of running 350 Dexterity, you're running 350 Intelligence. And now what I've done is I've eaten my food, but I actually need to change and eat a Dexterity food. So what you can see here is I'm going to put my Intelligence at 350. I'm going to go ahead and get my 25 Strength, my 25 Focus, and then the rest in Dexterity. Now, why 350 Intelligence? Wouldn't that lower my base damage? The answer is yes. You can see right there, look, I can hit 300 and 350. Wouldn't that lower my base damage? Yes, but what you want is this 10% ability damage. That's what's actually going to make the bleeds that you pop with the Flourish and Finish ability even higher. We'll talk about bleed pops in a second. For right now, we're going to leave it on this build right here, and we'll move forward. Now, let's go ahead and talk about skill trees themselves. And this, if you want to go ahead and screenshot this, this is a very, very standard evade skill tree. You're going fully into flurry. You're grabbing the 3 bleed increases, rapier cooldowns by 1% on hits, deal 10% more base damage if it has greater than 50% health, and 5% more if they have a rapier bleed. That's all you're taking on the blood tree is full flurry, and then this last one so that you can actually apply a bleed. On the gray side, you're taking everything from evade, right? And every perk upgrade except for controlled breathing. We're not necessarily worrying about the stam. And then we want to take one thing into riposte so that we can actually riposte. Now, technically, you could put this into Tondo if you wanted, if you don't want to play riposte, so you can apply a bleeds and stack them as much as you want. Or you could even put it into Flourish and Finish and be able to make the pops from this as well, but you're not going to get as much if you don't upgrade and go all the way down into this. So could you totally do it? Yes. But if you're going to do that, I would probably drop one of these perk upgrades, which is probably going to be the haste bubble right here, or even the breathe in. I'll probably drop breathe in, and I would take Flourish and Finish in this first bubble as an evade player, not as a bleed player, as an evade player. Because my goal, and we'll go out here in a second, is to just apply bleeds. Let me go find some elite enemies. Now, as I'm coming into here, and this is a pretty popular place I like to test in Tribunal High Mound when it comes to damage. One of the things I want to talk about is the difference between bleed and evade. If you're an evade player, you're not popping bleeds, which is the Flourish and Finish ability. What that means is any rapier that is attacking a mob, so this mammoth right here, when I apply a bleed from my rapier, that is called a bleed stack, right? We can do up to 3 bleed stacks per rapier. When it comes to the Flourish and Finish ability, you can actually pop bleeds and pop everyone's bleeds. So you don't want every person running Flourish and Finish, because then you're stopping damage to pop Flourish and Finish when you could just be continuing to evade and attack. But when it comes to the actual bleed pop, that's why I usually set 1 or 2, and they're going to be popping pretty often, so the evades can just pumping damage and putting in bleeds. Now, you might be asking, well, why wouldn't I just want to put Tondo instead of riposte? And it's just because I'm applying a bleed with flurry, and you're going to see in a moment how quickly I'm going to be able to continue to stack them with flurry, and those bleed pops will occur. So we'll be able to show you what this damage is like. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull one of these mammoths, and it's going to pull both of them, which is fine. But I want to show you the damage. Okay, so here I am. He's chasing me right here. I can go ahead and apply a flurry and then show you how much damage that flurry does. Here we go. 2k, 1700 per, and those are a lot of criticals that I just did. And that's just a benefit of having all of that keen that I have in my build right now. Now, that's just popping flurry. That's not actually the evade part of the gameplay, which is, and hopefully I don't die here just kiting these guys. The evade part of the gameplay is I light attack, and then I hit my omnidirectional evade ability, okay, which is this right here. And as I attack, because of the way we have everything set up, every time I do a light attack, it's going to cut that cooldown really quickly, and because I have so much crit chance, it's going to cut that down as well. So all I'm going to do is continue to basically left click or right trigger, whatever the case, and then I'm going to spam my ability. So you're going to want to put it on a shoulder button, which is just a single shoulder button if you're doing controller, or put it somewhere where you can constantly hit it as a mouse and keyboard player. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and evade this mammoth that's really low. So I'm going to move in on it right here. I'm just going to light attack. I'm spamming evade. And you can see how quickly I can melt him just by attacking. Now my health is low. Remember that leeching flurry? Watch this. I just got back 3k health by doing just that little bit right there. We can do some attacks right here. Boom, boom. All of that. I was going to be able to get all of my health back just because of the leeching that I have in my gear. Because you're doing so much damage and pumping it out, you're able to heal really quick. And you're able to do leeching flurry to get all of your heals back up as well. So running lower health is very risky. You definitely have to position yourself behind monsters or behind the ads, but high risk, high reward, high damage. So what we're going to do in here is I'm just going to go ahead and show you what my normal rotation would be. I'm going to go ahead and pop my flurry, Get in here, light attack. You can see I'm dodging so that I try not to get stuck in an attack. Monster is dead, right? Really easy, high damage, high reward. We'll do it one more time. We'll go over here. Getting on the back of him, 4K crits. You can see that momentum triggers really easily, which is the upgrade on the Grace tree, which is whenever you pop an ability, the next light attack does even more damage. And you can see that sometimes in Worm, I'll show you the clip right now where I'm popping like 8Ks, almost 9K damage on a light attack, guys. A light attack. That's what's nuts with this build, right? But the perfect part of this is when you start talking about from a bleed perspective, how much you're actually able to do from a damage. So you haven't seen my bleeds popped. Let's talk about bleed pop. Let's go ahead and switch over. So this, from a bleed perspective, this is probably how I would run my bleed tree. Some people drop Adagio, and they're able to get on guard right here to be able to get 10% more base damage when they have above 50% health, which is really nice. You could drop basically any of these as much as you can that you want to be able to do to get all the way into Flourish and Finish to grab that 150%, right? But Adagio, I just like it because you're able to increase that base damage. So I'm going to drop On Guard to be able to grab this right here to do the extra damage. And what I'm going to do is now I'm running Evade, Flurry, and Flourish and Finish. Now, I could have went Tondo instead of Evade, but I want to be able to pump out as much DPS as possible. So I'm going to show you what happens when you do a bleed pop. So for a bleed tree, this is what I would do. All the way into Flurry, all the way into Flourish and Finish, grabbing Refreshing Strikes as well as a Naring. We're grabbing Desperation, we're grabbing Perfectionist, Red Curtains, and then grabbing Evade all the way down to Adagio. Now you could drop Adagio and you could grab this right here, which is On Guard, 10% more base damage if they're above 50% health totally. And you could also just drop Evade altogether, keeping these 3 upgrades and grabbing Tondo. And you could just run like a Tondo build instead. But I want to show you just from this perspective, if you're still going to be able to evade and then pop your Flourish and Finish, being able to lay your bleeds in, whatever the case. So you're able to do damage from evade, but you're able to also pop bleeds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this mammoth right here. I'm going to show you what it means to actually pop a bleed. All right, so I have this mammoth here. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and apply a bleed right here. Boop. A bleed is applied. You can see it ticking, 243, right? I'm going to go ahead and hit Flourish and Finish. And you can see that it not only did the damage 3 at 3150, but it did another 3K, right? Well, the benefit here is depending on how many bleeds you stack, it's going to continue to pop all of them, which I don't think I'm going to be able to pop a whole bunch. Here's going to be 1. Let's go ahead and move around so I don't die. There's 2. You can see them ticking, right? And then here's 3. He has 3 stacks. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop Flourish and Finish. 30k, 6k, another 3k. It's a big, almost 20k plus damage just by popping that. And imagine if you had multiple rapiers applying bleeds, you're able to stack that really quick and do big damage. Now, from a bleed perspective, when you're evading, you're just continuing to attack and light attack. You're putting your bleeds in, and then you can pop with Flourish and Finish. So here we go. I'm going to grab this one mammoth, which will probably just grab both. It will. All right, let's not die here. Let's apply this right here. You can see I've applied 1. Here's stack 2. Flourish and Finish. Big pops of damage. Boom. Again, high risk, high reward. So we'll pop this. Bleed is on. Flourish and Finish. Big damage. You just saw the health bar just melt. And if I'm just continuing to evade, you can see how quickly that health bar just melts. And once again, I'm going to respec, and we're going to show you from a Tondo perspective how big the damage is when you actually do a 3-stack bleed. All right, so we've got this one mammoth here. I'm just going to use Tondo. We're going to apply the bleeds. Here we go. So, boom, bleed applied. Bleed applied. And then bleed applied. Now there's 3 bleeds on there. Now watch this. Watch his health. Do you see it? Did you see it? Just absolutely melt. And that's the power of this build. You can have all these evades just pumping damage, right? And then this one bleed just goes bloop and just chunks health. That's why people want these builds inside of raids, inside of Worm, inside of all of these elite trials. They want this build. And now to wrap up, this is obviously me showing this with the highest amount of damage I can by putting as much attributes into Dex or Intelligence and not putting into Constitution. What I would encourage you to do, if you're new to this build and you're just starting out, start out with some higher con. Go around 100 con or 50 con, get some health so you can get used, especially if you're not a DPS player. Let's say you're a healer or you're range and you're just finally getting up in the mix to do some damage and you're wanting to get used to it. Run some higher con and then lower it down as you start getting comfortable, because being 9k health and being squishy takes some time to get used to, and a dead DPS is 0 DPS. Okay, it's not worth it. So take the time, learn the build, try not to overdo it. You can see I just took one hit right there, right? You know, take the time, learn how to be able to control your placement, your dodges, figure out how that's going to work so that you can be successful and not die with such low con. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you have any comments or questions, comment down below. Remember, you don't have to go and get the most expensive gear, or you have to have the gear set that I had specifically. The Attuned Leather Pants comes from the end of the main story quest. All of the Azoth Crystal stuff you can get from M2 Expeditions, or you can just get them from the kiln. You can also just get some stuff on the market or craft them for 2 perkers and be just fine. You don't have to be 725 bis to be able to do it. Make sure you upgrade your Heartrunes, and regardless of that, have fun doing a massive amount of damage in this game. Thank you so much for watching this video, and we'll see you in the next one.